His name is Reginald, and he guards the place when I'm gone. Hi! Gender fluid. What is that? I found myself asking that question over and over again, not finding an adequate answer. A brief definition of the term is this: not strictly identifying as one distinct gender, perhaps identifying as a different gender at different times, or identifying as more than one gender at once. So, put plainly, this concept is based on a distinction between one's sex being biological fact and one's gender being entirely subjective. Further, that one's gender transcends, in terms of value, in terms of identity, transcends one's biological sex. Initial thoughts. At core, this concept teaches that you are what you feel. And the appropriate response in professional and social spheres of culture has become the unquestionable, immediate, positive affirmation of this person's self-diagnosis or self-identification, and failure to respond appropriately would mean the loss of your job, the loss of friends, the loss of family, the loss of rights. It could mean prison, depending on where you are. So this is a big deal. It's a weird deal because this isn't a majority problem, but somehow this has made its way onto the majority stage and it's affecting everyone. Trans-identifying people do not make up a significant portion of the UK or the US, and they make up probably no portion of places in the world where there's actual struggle, or where they're more rooted in nature, they're more in touch with the earth. Whereas here in the West, we are far more in touch with this weird, abstract, online world. We're far more in touch with entertainment, with media, than anything. So this response operates from the presupposition that gender is a social construct. However, if gender is a social construct, and if it is fluid, it wouldn't make sense for the appropriate response to be medication, hormone therapy, or surgery. If it's fluid, it wouldn't make sense to offer a permanent solution to it. Because this person who would have undergone the surgery or the hormone therapy or whatever it is, they haven't just socially transitioned, they've surgically transitioned. And that's not reversible. So they've made a permanent change for something that is supposedly fluid, something that could change in 2 years, or something that perhaps has a lot more to do with one's psychology, which could be worked out in therapy to integrate the psyche or the soul to the body, which would make far more sense. They could return to their biology, but then they can't properly because they've disfigured themselves at the advice and support of professionals and friends and family and society generally. The damage that's being done to these people, it's abuse. Worse if they're children, worse if they're teenagers, but still all the same, it's abuse, even for an adult who is clearly not in their right mind toward themselves. Gender is being defined as a choice. It's a personal choice. And that personal choice extends to the domain of physiological transformation. Medical professionals are required to exceed any requests for physiological transformation. They're required to affirm their client or their patient's self-diagnosis. That does not promote good mental, physical health. It destroys it. It neglects it. My biology is female. If my perception of being female is askew, if I have some issue about being female, the problem isn't with natural law. The problem isn't with biology. It's not with me being female. The problem is with my psychology. It's with my perception, which is something that is influenced by subjective experiences. If my introduction and my experience of being a woman, of being female, is negative, then my perception is going to be influenced by those experiences, by that introduction. And then what may happen is that I reject my femininity because of my beliefs about what it means to be female or feminine. But the problem, the issue, has never been with my biology. The biology is not wrong. Your sex is. It just is. And if you know God, if you believe that God created you and all things, then God is the one who purposed your being. There's purpose with you being male or female. Your psyche, your psychology, your soul is malleable, it's impressionable, it's intangible. The psyche needs to come into alignment with the physical, with the biology, not the other way around. The naturally changeable must conform to the naturally unchangeable. It can't work the other way. And it doesn't matter how far you go with your transition. It doesn't matter how happy you feel with the way that you now look, having gone through hormone therapy or surgery. Because all that's happened is that you've gone further and further and further into the delusion. Because what you are hasn't changed. You're still whatever your biology is. That does not change. You're only moving away further and further. You're out of alignment. And if you're out of alignment, how can you be you? How can you be or claim to be pursuing your authentic self? And if you're of the opinion that I'm wrong and that you can transition and that, you know, if you feel that you've always been a girl but you're biologically or you were assigned male at birth, if you think that all of this is actually really reasonable and makes sense and, you know, whatever, then let's apply the logic to something else, because that's what you should do. You should be consistent with what you believe. Otherwise you're lying. You're just lying to yourself for some reason. So let's be consistent with that. So let's say that you're biologically, your sex is male. You know, you were assigned male at birth, but you've never quite felt at home in your body. And let's say that, you know, growing up throughout your childhood, throughout your adolescence, you've just noticed the difference more and more. You know, maybe you were more sensitive, you were interested in not so typically manly things, you know, so your conclusion then became that, well, I must be a girl then. I must be, because I don't relate to this maleness. I must be female. Let's apply the logic to something else. If a man loses his arm And he feels it phantom, because that is something that typically happens. He feels that he still has both of his arms. And that feeling is very real to him. Do we positively affirm to him, unquestionably, that he does indeed have two arms, and treat him, put him in situations, treat him as if he does? Is that helpful? Or should we help the man mentally, emotionally adjust to the loss of his arm? Should we help him to come into alignment with his new physicality? Or take this, which I'm sure most of you have probably heard before. Let's take someone who is anorexic. So when they look at themselves, they could be dangerously underweight, dangerously. But when they look at themselves in the mirror, they think that they genuinely believe that they are fat and that it's disgusting, and they don't want to eat. They can't bring themselves to do it because they just feel so gross. But when you and I look at them, we see that they're dangerously thin and that they're actually in danger of getting seriously ill or even dying. What do? Do we positively affirm the way that they see themselves, the beliefs that they have about themselves? Or do we help them? Do we recognize that what they're experiencing is actually a faulty perception of themselves, and try to figure out with them how we can heal that and where that's coming from? Now, to me, I don't know about you, but to me, the answers to those two examples are really obvious. But if you were being consistent with your logic, with your transgenderism logic, you wouldn't choose the obvious conclusion to either of those examples, just out of necessity, because otherwise you're lying. And the other thing is, this has nothing to do with the long-term suppression of transgender identifying individuals. This is a social contagion that is specifically affecting or afflicting teenage girls. And to be quite honest with you, there have always been social contagions that afflict mainly teenage girls because of the fact that they are teenage girls. What's made it worse is social media, or generally access to the internet, to online platforms, whether that's gaming, streaming shows, whatever, listening to music, the kinds of things that are now entertainment. That's what's changed. And the access to that. And the age that you have access to that. Because if this was about suppression, if, trans people have always existed, they just haven't felt comfortable coming out, well, you'd see them coming out, because there is no stigma now. The world is totally accepting of trans identifying people. Also, what you would see is, as social acceptance of however many genders rises, so would the rates of depression and anxiety and suicide. They would decrease. But we see the opposite. Teenage girls are experiencing a major mental health crisis. High rates of anxiety and depression, self-harm. There's been a transformation in the way that transgender identity is conceptualized and treated in the last 5 years. What's the motivator? Why? It's not normal. You'll notice that the doctors and the psychologists and medical professionals and whoever they might be, their professional moral responsibilities come second to their activism on this issue. Like, it's not necessarily that they're consistently like that. No, it's this issue. It's like the investigation as a medical professional, the investigation when a person comes to you, the investigation begins and ends with the patient's self-diagnosis. It's insane. What actual evidence is there that there is a real difference between sex and gender? What evidence is there that a person who says that they are non-binary is actually non-binary? Like, what is that? Other than the person saying so. Other than a person saying that they are something, What evidence is there that they are that thing? That they're not just playing make-believe? Because reality is hard. And it hurts. The problem is, and has always been, that there has been a rigid idea, a one-dimensional understanding of what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman. That's where we get the stereotypes from, which, by the way, aren't inherently bad. And they're not inherently wrong. Stereotypes exist for a reason. However, even though it should go without saying, we're not all the same, regardless of whether we are the same sex. We're not all the same person. We're different people. We look different, we sound different, we act different. We have different lives, different experiences. We're not one-dimensional. And so you might meet a woman who has typically masculine characteristics, or you might meet a man who has some feminine characteristics. That doesn't change what they are. But the transgenderism ideology use any personal deviation from this rigid idea of what a man is and what a woman is socially, and they regard that as evidence for the proposed reality of gender fluid, non-binary, transgenderism. But it's not. It's not that. It's just human. And it's catastrophic. It's abusive to confuse children and teenagers regarding their gender identity or their identity at all. They are at a critical stage of development. They are at a critical stage of attempting to catalyze their individuality, their identity, all the while experiencing the peak of hormonal transformation. You're messing with someone who is vulnerable. It's irresponsible and it's damaging to then offer them an infinite amount of ways to be regarding their being, none of which prepare them for the real world. And if a person is taken down the route or chooses to go down the route of medical or surgical transitioning, these changes that are being promoted and pushed onto these vulnerable people are irreversible. Like, you're straight up being lied to about the hormones that you're taking, about the procedures you're going through, about the aftercare, about the long-term mental health effect and physical effect. Like, this is not this is weird. This is one of those things that in like 40 years time the world's going to look back on and there's going to be like this big like those exposés. There's going to be one of them, I hope, because this is weird. This is not freedom. This does not promote freedom. This does not perpetuate humanity. This is not promoting human flourishing. This is not good. This is delusional on the part of the person seeking a solution to the way they feel. And on the part of the professionals, this is selfish. It is no small thing to alter your physiology. And it does not make sense to try to fix a perception, a psychological issue with medication or surgery. Again, if you think that that is a good solution, apply that logic to other things. And if you're honest with yourself and with reality, you'll recognize the absurdity. We are being told what to say and what to think before you even have the opportunity to form an opinion on the matter. Someone explain to me how that is anything other than dystopian, than tyrannical. That is anti-freedom. Let's talk about sex and gender. What is the actual difference between sex and gender? Or, to better present the question, what data do we have? What evidence is there of a difference between your biological sex and gender? My conclusion, after delving and from personal experience, is That this is just a game of semantics. This is a manipulation of language. It's changing dictionary definitions to suit subjective experiences or perceptions, rather than basing them on truth, on objective reality, the reality that we all share. There's just one of those. There's not multiple. There is a real, natural world where your biology matters. Here's why I'm so black and white on the issue. Aside from the fact that it is literally binary, I don't think there is a difference between sex and gender. I certainly see no evidence for it. What I do see and acknowledge and have had personal experience with is that some people are at odds with their body. And I say some people, really, at one stage or another, or even throughout life, a human being will experience discomfort in their body, in their physicality. But those feelings, that state, doesn't mean that you actually are whatever gender you have identified as, whatever label you've slapped on yourself to try and cope with these feelings you're having. Like, if I'm at odds with my physical self, if I feel like I'm trapped in a female body, though it might certainly really feel that way, that doesn't mean that I actually am a male trapped in a female's body and that I should pursue surgery or hormone therapy. Because that doesn't even change what I am. So I understand personally the inner struggle, and at the same time I recognize where the problem actually is. And that's not an easy journey, but it is necessary. I cannot, in my right mind, expect the objective, natural world to conform to my self-perception, to my subjective experience of it. It will always be the other way around. And the best thing I can do for myself is to heal the parts of me that are preventing me from being in alignment with the objective, natural world, with my biology. Second is this. Let's consider this definition of gender. Gender is a social construction relating to behaviors and attributes based on labels of masculinity and femininity. Gender identity is a personal, internal perception of oneself, and so the gender category someone identifies with may not match the sex they were assigned at birth. I absolutely despise the use of assigned. No one was assigned their sex at birth or their gender at birth. No one has misgendered you. If anything, you're misgendering you. Anyway, so this definition, when I read it, all I'm hearing is that we're not one-dimensional. All we're really taking note of here is differences in preference, or differences in personality, in likes and dislikes, interests and disinterests. That's it. And I hate to break it to you, but that doesn't make you special. That just makes you human. We're all like that. There is no need to open up this doorway into infinite gender or to made-up labels that spawn from within a person that somehow the rest of all humanity must intuitively know and verbally affirm upon laying eyes on you. That's insanity. That is unreasonable. The goal of gender fluid or non-binary or transgender is to either look like the opposite of what they are, or to make themselves look androgynous so you can't tell upon looking at them. It is utter confusion. It just promotes confusion. It's confusing for those who are self-identifying in whatever way, apart from their biology, and it is confusing for everyone else who is expected to conform their language and their thinking and their behavior to affirm another person's self-identification, despite truth, as if they're telepathic or blind. What do we conclude? Since there is no sense to this ideology, it is unreasonable, it is inconsistent, it's harmful. I'm convinced that this agenda is purely to rip children away from their parents, to remove parental authority over these vulnerable people, to leave these vulnerable people to these vampires, and not only children, but other people, other vulnerable people, to turn them into anti-establishment, down with the man, down with the patriarch, let's destroy the government and the police and everything, and let's build anew. At core, it's to promote rebellion. It's to destroy. Transgenderism is another CRT. It's another critical race theory. It's, on the one hand, desiring to destroy establishment, to usher in a type of communism, and anyone from a post-communist or communist or just generally tyrannical country who's come here can see what's happening. Double speak, restricted language, political agendas being forced upon healthcare, upon schools, the silencing of religious authorities, the denouncing of God and morality and truth. And on the other hand is the destruction of the temple of God. It's the destruction and the perversion of the image of God. That begins, as always, at the destruction of the family unit. I would be wary of anything that seeks to demean or destroy the male-female bond, marital bond, and the nuclear family that comes with that. A person's soul and body, their psychology and their physicality must be married. If one or the other is off doing its own thing, then there's damage, there's distortion. The healthy path, the most fruitful path, the one that promotes flourishing, is the one that seeks to marry the two, to bring the two into alignment. However difficult that is for you, it's worth it because you are moving toward freedom. And as I stated, my biology is female. If my perception is askew, the problem is not with nature. The problem is not with objective reality. It's not with biological fact. It is with the psychology. It's with the soul. It's with one's emotional state. It's with one's environment. It's with what you've been exposed to or what you're currently exposing yourself to. It's to do with the dynamics of family, your upbringing, your introduction to what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman and how that fits within your family and then society. The mind is malleable, it's impressionable, it's intangible. It needs to come into alignment with biology, not the other way around. The naturally changeable must conform to the naturally unchangeable. Peace out, layers. My name is Christ Defender. I defend the Christian faith. I answer questions and criticisms concerning Christianity. If you like what I do, there are two ways to support me. You can find 2 links in the description box below. One to my Patreon account where you can support me financially on a monthly basis. And the other is my merch. Or, do the bare minimum and like and subscribe. All right. Thanks a bunch. Bye.